Hey, how you doing today? Awesome to hear, as per usual. Welcome back to another episode of Tomb Talk, and welcome back to the next installment in my 10 out of 10 album saga. Today we'll be talking about the 1990s, which, for me personally, is my favorite decade of music ever. I think that the 90s just had so many amazing, influential, game-changing artists and bands come out, and most of those artists will be on this list today. I just think that this is where music, maybe not its peak, but one of its biggest peaks for me comes from this decade. And I would love to talk about them today. We have quite a few albums on this list. I think we have 20. A lot more than the 80s ranking. Although I do want to say I missed some on my 80s list, one of them being Hounds of Love by Kate Bush. I think that album is a masterpiece, and that 100% would be on there. But yeah, the 90s are my favorite decade ever for music, for a multitude of reasons that we'll be going over today. And I'm going to be kind of speedrunning through a lot of these albums, maybe like a minute each. There's a couple that I really want to go in depth on, but for most of these I'm just going to say why I love them, and then we're just going to move on. So yeah, let's go ahead and begin. We're going to be going over the hip-hop 10s I have for the decade first. So we will be starting off with the Low End Theory, Tribe Called Quest. I don't think this is much surprise from anybody. Just so much amazing production from Q-Tip, so many amazing rhymes, so many iconic moments and iconic songs on this thing. Just, it's not too long, but at the same time it has plenty of length for you to be invested and not get tired of it. It's so much fun. It's just so it's so gripping, so engaging. And the cover as well is like a 10 out of 10 cover. I freaking love the cover to this thing. I do also like the cover for like Midnight Marauders as well and others, but oh my god, the cover on this is just so sick, and this album in general is so sick. I truly would say that this is a top 10 hip-hop album, and I think for anybody trying to get into hip-hop, this is like a top 3 must-listen to get you started. But yeah, no, we're going to move on to De La Soul's 3 Feet High and Rising. The main reason this one for me is a 10 is generally because of how entertaining it is. I do think that, well, I mean, song-wise too, I mean, there's just incredible songs like, The Magic Number, I Know, and freaking Me, Myself, and I, which I love the on that track. Love that. I love everything on this thing. That's a 10 for a reason. But for me, what elevates this to a 10 even more is just how damn fun it is. For anyone who watched my Beastie Boys list recently, which might not be many, but for anyone that did, one reason I love Beastie Boys so much is just because of how fun they are. And that's another thing with this album. This is like one of the most fun rap albums there is. You cannot help but just have a blast listening to this thing. And it also helps that this thing is loaded. It has 23 tracks over an hour, tons of variety in the tunes, all of which are so diverse and unique, but it's coherent at the same time. Like, you can tell, oh yeah, that's De La Soul. That's why I love it. I think that it is also a super influential album, one of the best hip-hop albums to come out of the 90s, and one of the best hip-hop albums of all time. Next up is going to be Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. This is the only album from Lauryn Hill, of course her only solo album. I just really love the themes of this record. I love how consistent it is, talking about Lauryn Hill's life and just the hardships she went through, but she twists it up in her lyrics so that way she doesn't make it like super apparent that is what she's talking about. And just tons of fun tracks like Doo Wop and Lost Ones, X Factor, Final Hour, Superstar, just tons of great tracks on this thing. And I do think it has some of the best production of any hip hop album ever. It is a little lengthy, but for me personally, I love that. I love just having more to listen to and just more to experience. I can see how that might be a bit of a turnoff for some people, and I know that some people aren't a fan of Lauryn Hill, as an artist, but for me, I think that this album cements her spot in hip-hop history, and she will always be there. Next up, enter the Wu-Tang 36 Chambers! Excuse me. I love Wu-Tang Clan. They're in my top 3 hip-hop groups ever. I freaking love them to death. This happens to be my favorite of them. I love all their albums, with one exception, but y'all probably know what that is. But, hey, this album is just freaking amazing. Again, incredible production, incredible lyrics, incredible rapping, incredible rhymes. Just so awesome all the way through. Bring the Ruckus, freaking, you've got Cream, you've got Can It All Be So Simple, freaking Protect Your Neck, Mortal Man, just, oh my god, how are you not listening to this thing right now? I have this on vinyl. It's one of the few vinyls I have on this list, Sally. Just can't really afford a whole ton right now. But out of all the ones I have, I'm so glad it's this one because, my god, I have this thing spinning all the time. I love this album to death. I think it's another hip-hop essential, and although I do love all the other hip-hop albums on this list, for me, this is like a 10 and beyond, like an 11 out of 10, which there are a few of on here, but like this is like, this, Low End Theory, and like Paul's Boutique are like the standard that every other hip-hop album has to meet. And that's just, yeah, that's what I have to say about it. I think it's amazing, and if you haven't listened to it, I highly recommend it. Final one I'm going to touch on here really quick is going to be Things Fall Apart from The Roots. I just think that this album is incredibly, I think it's incredibly unique for its themes, and it's just, like, its political theming that it has throughout the album is just super gripping and engaging. I also think the songs are all just a jam. It's not, again, not too short, not too long. The cover is super iconic and memorable, and it comes from another one of my favorite hip-hop groups, being The Roots, which I actually think are quite underrated. And I think that this is their best album. This is their third studio album. I love their whole discography, but I just think that this album cements what they are good at the best. And yeah, that's really all I want to say. I think it's another super standout of the 90s, and it's a super standout in hip-hop in general. I would definitely say that this is a top 10, top 15 hip-hop album of all time, for me personally. Alright, we're going to move on from hip-hop. Those are all my hip-hop / rap picks of the decade. Now we're going to get into the grunge, and I know a lot of people don't like the grunge era of music. I know a lot of people aren't a fan of the style or the singing or just how it goes from quiet to super bombastic in the chorus. I know a lot of people aren't a fan of that, but for me personally, I have always loved grunge, mainly because of my mom and dad. Their favorite genre is grunge. I listened to the hell out of so much grunge. Soundgarden, Pearl Jam, Stone Temple Pilots, Alice in Chains, and of course Nirvana, which Nirvana's Nevermind is next up on our list. I'm not going to talk about this one too much because I have a whole section on my Nirvana tier list dedicated to it, but this really is just a masterpiece of a grunge album. Every song is an absolute jam. Kurt Cobain's lyrics are amazing, and his vocals are so gritty and raw. I love that this album really cemented in society, like, the fact that you can make an album in a garage with a little budget and have it be a smash hit. You don't have to have a big studio or anything like that to be successful. I really like that this is like the album that cemented that idea into people's heads. And it's just amazing. Like, it's iconic, it's memorable, it's super fun, super engaging, it's not too long. Just like, I know a lot of people complain about an album's length. Like, if it's too long, then they can't get engaged. So, I mean, for you people who can't get engaged with longer albums, this thing is nice 40, like, I think it's like 45 minutes, somewhere around there. Not too long. It's just a jam all around. If you want to hear a little bit more in depth, I'd recommend checking out that video, but I'm just going to leave it there. It is 100% a 10 out of 10. My other grunge pick for the decade is going to go to Dirt. I really wanted to put Soundgarden's Super Unknown on here, but one, we already have 2 grunge albums on here. I didn't want to do 3. 2, I do think that Super Unknown has 1 or 2 songs that aren't as strong as the rest of the track list, doesn't mean that Super Unknown is a bad album. I think that album is amazing. I just think it kind of holds it back. And 3 is just that I already have 20 albums on this list, so I didn't want to include even more. I wanted to get like the essentials on here. But on a good day, I would consider Super Unknown to be a 10. But this is my other 10 for grunge. I think that Dirt is an absolute amazing album. I think that Lane Staley is like one of the best vocalists to ever live. Okay, maybe not that far. He's like, okay, he's my favorite grunge singer. I think that his voice is just incredibly unique and stylized, and the way he can just hit those high notes just sounds like nothing anyone else can do. Same with Chris Cornell. I think that those two are the best grunge singers. But just, man, Lane Staley's voice is just untouchable. And I know a lot of people think Alice in Chains is still good today, and I wouldn't say they're bad. I just don't think it's the same without Lane Staley's iconic vocals. But for anyone who hasn't listened to Dirt, this is one of the heaviest albums you will ever hear. From front to back, this thing is just slam dunk after slam dunk. So many iconic tunes like Rain When I Die, Down in a Hole, Them Bones. You've got Dirt, Angry Chair, Wood. I mean, it's just amazing. I really think that some of the best grunge songs of all time land on this album. And don't tell anyone, but I think this is better than Nevermind. They're both 10s, but I think this is better. Yep, but moving on, we're going to get into some electronica now, and it is the king of IDM himself, Richard D. James of Aphex Twin, with Richard D. James' album. I'm a huge Aphex Twin fan, in fact. One of my upcoming lists is going to be my Aphex Twin tier list, where you will be seeing this at the top. I do think this album is a 10 out of 10. I know a lot of people think Selected Ambient Works 86 to 92 is his best. I know a lot of people think Drux is his best. For me personally, I do think that it is this one. I just think that everything that Richard is good at as an IDM artist shows up on here. I just love the beats on all these tracks, like 4 and Cornish Acid, and Finger Bib, Carnmarth. Yellow Calx? Yeah, that's what it is. Really great IDM songs, and I think that this is the quintessential IDM album. Also, well, fun fact is, like, this, and I mean Aphex Twin in general, really is like the man who created drill and bass, which is really cool. But for anyone who has any interest in electronic music, anything like that, this is a must listen. And Richard D. James and Aphex Twin as a whole is a must listen. I know a lot of people get turned off by it because there's no vocals, and I know that could be hard for people, but I'm a guy who loves jazz, I love IDM, I love this music that doesn't need vocals to stand out on its own. And I think that this is a prime example of that. I think this is a 10 out of 10. No questions asked. Next up is going to be Bjork's Homogenic, which, again, I know a lot of people will pick Vespertine. I also love Vespertine, and I know a lot of people would pick Post. I love Post as well. But for me, the thing that makes Bjork so special, and the thing that makes her, like, the stuff that makes her the amazing artist she is all shown the best on this album. And even if this wasn't her best album as a whole, which it is, this album would be a 10 no matter what, just from the song Yoga, or Joga, I can never pronounce it right. That is, like, one of the best songs I have ever heard in my life. It is definitely a top 10 song I've ever heard. That thing is an absolute masterpiece. That alone would carry this to a 10. But it helps that all the other songs are absolutely incredible as well. You've got, Hunter, which is that amazing opener. Unravel. You've got Pluto, which I love the beat on Pluto, and I love how literally just the second half of the song is her screaming. I love that. It's just so damn cool. 5 Years has a great beat as well. Alarm Call is great. Just like, I don't know, man. I just think that for how amazing of an artist Bjork is, and in my opinion she is one of, like, the greatest solo artists of our time, I just think this is her best work. Vespertine is also a 9 out of 10, though. Like, she's made like 3 or 4 albums that could be considered a 9 or a 10, but for me, this is that pick. Next up, I'm going to give a shout out to Depeche Mode's Violator. I saw a lot of people, For anybody who watches the Needle Dropper Fantano, I know that he ranked this a 10 as well, and a lot of people gave him some backlash for it. A lot of people say it's just kind of an okay album. I strongly disagree. Some of my favorite singles from the 90s are on this thing, such as Enjoy the Silence and Personal Jesus, but the album as a whole just is such a beautiful, beautiful sounding record. I just think that also it's just one of the most like iconic and most essential, I don't know what it's called, synth pop? I don't know if they technically count as that, but just like the synth work on this thing is great. Everything about it is excellent. It has some amazing lyrics, has some amazing vocals. World in My Eyes is such an amazing song, such as Sweetest Perfection, Blue Dress, and Clean. Again, this album is just absolutely gorgeous, and I truly do think it is a 10. I love Depeche Mode. I have for a long time. Enjoy the Silence is the first Depeche Mode song I ever heard, and I was just blown away. I was like, whoa, this sounds so cool. And that really just shows, like, how unique sounding they are. And I know for a lot of people, like I said, they might not consider this to be a 10 out of 10. But I love it. And just for me personally, I mean, I'm no master critic or anything. But for me, being the music lover I am, this thing is a 10 for sure. Next up is going to be Elliott Smith's self-titled album. And I think that this is probably, I know a lot of people will disagree with this, but I think that this is probably the essential singer-songwriter album of this decade. This and Jeff Buckley's Grace, I'd probably say, are like the two essentials, but I do think Grace is like an 8 or a 9. Still an amazing album. But yeah, Elliott Smith, one of my favorite singer-songwriters ever. I also love Either Or. I also do enjoy Roman Candle. I also do enjoy Figure Eight. But this is my personal favorite of his. I think that this album is absolutely beautiful in its simplicity. Most of it is just Elliott and a guitar, which I think is him at his best. And I just think that his songwriting is strongest on this album. You have his most iconic songs, which are like Christian Brothers and Needle in the Hay. You've got Satellite. I mean, there really is, it's really just essential Elliott Smith songs front to back. And I don't think any of them are a dud. I think all of them are actually very beautiful and incredible. Even the shorter tracks, I think, are just super standouts. And there's not a single part of this record I would call bad or even mediocre. I just think that for anyone interested in a more simplistic sounding album, this is the way to go. Ugh, I don't know why I'm having trouble breathing today. Next up, Mazzy Star's So Tonight That I Might See. I already touched on this in a very recent video, but I do think that Mazzy Star's second album is a masterpiece. This is another one I own on vinyl. I do think that this thing is absolutely incredible. I'm not going to touch on it too much because I already said it. I already talked about it for like 10 minutes in that video. But just to put it lightly, this is one of the most like depressing albums you will ever hear. Some of the saddest songs that I've ever had the pleasure of listening to are on this album. I cannot get through this thing without crying at least twice. The two songs that always make me cry are Blue Light and Into Dust, which I think are the best songs on the record. Fade Into You also tears me up at times. It is just so gorgeous. And this is without a doubt another 11 out of 10 for me. Just super underrated too. I know a lot of people love Fade Into You, but I think no one really respects the album as a whole as they should. Because for me personally, the whole thing front to back is a masterpiece. I think every song is either a rocker or it's so devastating. And I truly do think it deserves more love than it has. Whew. Alright, next up is going to be Loveless by My Bloody Valentine. My Bloody Valentine has always been a band that I have been quite fond of, even though their discography is rather short, only being, I believe, 4 records long. But I think that this album is just so beautiful, man. So beautiful. It has such a lush and rich and unique production style that no other album on this list has. And it makes songs like Blown a Wish and Only Shallow and Loomer just sound so unique and so different. No album ever really has sounded like this one. And I just think that mainly the vocals are just so beautiful on this thing. And also the guitar playing. The guitar work on this thing is excellent. But as a whole, I mean, I really do enjoy it. I would happily consider this a 10. I know a lot of people might consider this overrated. Not me, though. Yeah, that's all I want to say. Next up, we're going to start going a little bit faster on these because this video is already starting to get a little long. Next up is Rage Against the Machine, self-titled. One of the best political albums ever made. Some of the most badass songs ever made, such as Killing in the Name of... Boom, burn it, down, boom, burn it. You've got, that. You've got Bomb Track. You've got Settle for Nothing, Know Your Enemy. Just badass song after badass song. This is another situation like Nevermind where the tracks are just so hard-hitting and so, awesome. You can't not give it a 10. Come on, man. I know a lot of people would probably put Evil Empire in this spot. Not me, though. I think their self-titled is their best. Next up, I'm going to touch very briefly on this one because I think this one is a 10 if you have not heard it. I think that Portishead's Dummy is one of the most, mysterious albums ever made. It's so hard to explain, but it's just so raveled in mystery and mystique, and it's so eerie. And I think that really, for you to understand what makes it a masterpiece, is to hear it first time for yourself. This is one of the most engaging listens front to back you can have for an album, and for that reason, I do think that this 100% is a 10. I do want to leave it there though, because like I said, this thing needs to be experienced to understand what makes it so good. If I try to explain it, you're not going to get it. Next up, we got Spiderland by Slint. I know a lot of people might not agree with this one. I think this album is freaking great. I love this album. This is the invention of math rock, and most of this album is just really damn slow. Just really slow melodic tunes. But that's why I love it. To me, Slint were just so ahead of their time, and it's a shame that they only made 2 albums, because I think that this thing, just like another artist that we're going to get to very shortly, their second album really, hit it off, and I wish I could have gotten to see more of what they had to offer. I know this thing was a pain in the ass to record, but the boys are from Kentucky, just like me, so I can kind of relate there. But, yeah, I mean, if you're a fan of, freaky, slow tunes, this thing is for you. You've got Breadcrumb Trail, Nosferatu Man, which is just so weird. You've got Washer, which is an 8-minute long instrumental that I love, as well as For Dinner, which is another 5-minute instrumental. Super slow, like I said, but really cool. And then you've got Good Morning Captain, which is just a really awesome way to end the album. Only 6 tracks, but yet it still manages to be about 40 minutes long, because these are pretty long tracks. But yeah. Like I said, if you're at all interested in slow melodic tunes, you'll understand why this is a 10. And I know a lot of people might not put it as a 10. It is for me personally, though. I don't care. Next up, we're going to touch on this one very briefly, because I already talked about it. The Downward Spiral by 9 Inch Nails, one of the best concept albums ever made. Some of the most heavy-hitting songs of the 90s are on this thing. Some of the most essential industrial rock tunes of all time, such as March of the Pigs, Closer, and Hurt, show up on here. Trent Reznor's vocals are amazing. Some of the lyrics can be a bit cringy at times, but the theming of this album is incredible. And it is without a doubt a 10 in my opinion. And if you disagree, sorry. Already touched base on this one too. Modest Mouse's The Lonesome Crowded West. For anyone that saw that video, which quite a few did actually, so thank you guys. I love Modest Mouse to death. They're one of my favorite bands, and this is one of my favorite albums ever. Definitely a top 10. In my opinion, the second most essential indie rock album, which I know a lot of people might put this way lower. Not for me though. I do think that this is one of the most unique indie rock albums there is, for a multitude of reasons. The most notable one probably being Isaac Brock's singing and his lyricism, because he's such a unique lyricist and such a unique vocalist that I just think that it makes this thing so incredibly gripping, and the theming of this is just amazing. I love it, and if you want to know more, check out my Modest Mouse tier list, and I'll explain even more why it's a 10. Alright, we're in the home stretch now. Next up is going to be OK Computer by Radiohead. This is probably the most obvious pick on this list, and I know a lot of people are probably going to roll their eyes and be like, oh, that album is so overrated, blah, blah, blah. Hey, man, you can like whatever you like, and that is perfectly fine. For me personally, I have no issue calling OK Computer a masterpiece. It really is the album that, like, introduced to the general public how useful technology can be in developing an album. Like, without this album, we would have, like, nothing. It's very similar to the Beatles back in the 60s and what they introduced to the general public. But, like, without this album hitting the mainstream and becoming as big as it is, we wouldn't have any of the music we have today. We really would not. And it also helps that this album has amazing track after amazing track, such as, you know, Airbag, Paranoid Android, Let Down, freaking Karma Police, Electioneering, Lucky, Climbing Up the Walls. Like, come on, man. These tracks are amazing, and they form together to make such a coherent, cohesive, and just fluid album that just never has any misses from start to finish. Even Fitter Happier, which I know is just a stupid-ass little interlude track, it's just so eerie, and even when I'm doing a front-to-back listen, I never skip it, because it's just so weird and so cool. But yeah, again, watch my Radiohead tier list if you want to hear more. We're going to leave it there. And finally, I don't want to say this because they're all 10s, but to me personally, I saved the best for last. In the Aeroplane Over the Sea by Neutral Milk Hotel. And I know that this album gets a lot of hate nowadays. I know a lot of people meme on this album. I know a lot of people call it like a Virgin album, shit like that, which I think, oh, that's just super stupid and unfunny. But I'm just gonna say it. It might not be my favorite, but this might be the greatest album I've ever listened to. It really might. And no, that's not coming from me being an incel or anything like that. I know a lot of people will say stupid shit like that. Which, hey, if you want to, man, comment down below and we'll talk about it. But to me, no other album I have ever heard has as good of a flow, has as cool and interesting lyrics, has such great use of brass instrumentation, has so many just unique songs that just sound nothing like each other, but yet fit together in such an incredible way and form this 40-minute magnum opus of music. Just no other record I can think of hits those points as well as this thing does. And fight me if you want, this has the best flow from track to track of any album I have ever heard. There are so many points on here where you're like, holy shit, the next song is starting? You have no idea, because it just flows so well. And my god, some of my favorite songs of all time are on here, such as the title track, which is just so beautiful. You've got Holland 1945, which is just such a jam. You've got O Comely, which is one of the most devastating songs I've ever heard. Jeff Magnum, like, he's literally gasping for air because he's trying to get all those vocals out at once, and he's literally just sitting there like literally forcing himself to do all that, and that is just so impressive. You have Ghost, which has like my favorite climax to a song ever. One of my favorite climaxes to a song ever. The way all the way all the instruments just collide on that track is so gorgeous and feels like such an amazing climax to the whole record. And that's not even the climax to the record. That happens in the untitled extra track that comes next, which is so freaking badass and so awesome to listen to. And I listen to the two back to back all the time. And then you have Two-Headed Boy Part 2, which of course follows Two-Headed Boy, which is another stellar track, which is just so devastating. Such a gorgeous, my goodness, I don't know why I keep burping. Just such a gorgeous track. It's such a beautiful way to end the album. And like I said, this really is, like, probably... There's one other album I can think of, which we're going to look at in the 2000s ranking, that I think compares to this as, like, being the best album ever made. There's one more that's coming up, and I'm not going to spoil it. But yeah. I don't even know what else to say, man. This truly is like a life-changing listen. And if you haven't heard it, the second you do hear it, you'll be like, oh my god. This is like the most unique sounding thing I've ever heard. It really is. I think this album, of course, is an absolute masterpiece. And like I said, it is one of the ones on here I would consider an 11 out of 10. Just because not only is it perfect, but it goes above and beyond to be something that is unlike anything else in this world. But yeah, that's going to be my 10 out of 10 list for the 1990s. I just want to say before I end this, what an incredible decade for music. And every music I know has its ups and downs and its greats and bads. But like, man, just, to me, no other decade has as much quality music as the 90s. Just from your typical rock, to your rap, to your industrial, to your hip-hop, to your freaking electronica. Just, you have so many genres defining themselves and just making the best music that you can listen to. And it's without a doubt my favorite decade of music ever. And I hope that you all got a little kick out of it, seeing all these picks. If there's any you believed I missed, or there's any you disagree with, please leave me a comment. I love talking to you guys in the comments when you do leave them, so please make sure to leave one. I love having discussions with you all. I love seeing other people that are as passionate about music as I am. And once again, just thank you all so much for tuning in, and you all have a wonderful day.